Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the AskDrKurt podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing the thyroid lifestyle. So that's all the things that you can do lifestyle-wise that will improve thyroid function. I assume if many of you have made it to this podcast, we've already gone through what are the most common symptoms, when and why, and how to go to the doctor and begin to look at your thyroid. We went over our full thyroid lab podcast, which was hopefully eye-opening to many people, because as you can see, if you go back to that podcast, we'll link it below, it requires a lot of different testing, a lot of different tests very specific to the thyroid to even begin to understand what's happening with the thyroid. Today, we're going to expand on that a little bit further and hit what I like to call the body environment. So the thyroid hormones, thyroid production of hormones, thyroid function. I'm going to kind of use those terms a little interchangeably throughout this. I'll be descriptive when we need to be, when it's very specific. But overall, the thyroid system requires the whole body environment to function properly. And there's a few different categories of that. And we're going to dive into it. But why aren't a lot of doctors talking about the body environment? Why aren't they bringing up iron status when it comes to thyroid? Now, that one might be the most common. A lot of people do bring up iron. A lot of times not in relation to thyroid. But it's really interesting that we see now many thyroid panels, they don't even look at T3. Your body doesn't use T4. T4 is kind of your storage hormone. It's what the thyroid gland predominantly makes. But your body has to convert that T4 to T3 to be usable. And there's many forms of T3 as well. So it becomes this complicated thing. But most of the time, we don't even, a lot of doctors don't even run T3. And I've had multiple clients come in now telling me their doctor told them that T3 is not important. Conversion doesn't matter. Well, how does your body use thyroid hormone then? That was an interesting one. I didn't quite understand that one, and partly I think it's because outside of prescribing synthetic or even bioidentical T4, bioidenticals are a little better, but outside of prescribing hormones, what does standard medicine have to offer a thyroid patient? Not much is the answer. Really not much at all. So today we're going to be breaking down what are those extra things that we do that we incorporate into a thyroid case that we have to address, and that in some cases ends up being the biggest part of thyroid function. So welcome back to the Thyroid Lifestyle Part 3 or Part 4. Can't remember. It's one of the parts. We do have a special, I believe it's a special Part 3 coming out. So sorry, that one's coming out later. But today we're really going to dive into some of this stuff. So what is the body environment? Well, thyroid hormone requires 4 main tissues or organs that convert most of the T4 into T3 in the body. The liver, the kidneys, the muscles, your muscle mass, and your brain. So those are the 4 tissues. That is kind of the 4 main areas that encompass the body environment. And when we have issues in those areas, I don't want to say 100%, but 99% of the time we'll have a thyroid issue to some degree. And the first thing we want to touch on is liver and kidneys. So approximately 80% of the T4 to T3 conversion happens in the liver and the kidneys. Mostly the liver. I think the liver's about 80%, kidneys about 10 to 20%, muscle mass about 5 to 10%, and the brain has a negligible amount of T4 to T3 conversion, but we're going to be talking about that as we come up. So call it 80 to 90+% of our T4 to T3 conversion is happening in your liver and your kidneys, your main detox organs. So detox is really powerful. Healthy liver function is really powerful. If you have kidney stones, if we have acid-base problems, we have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, gallbladder issues. All these things indicate we probably have a thyroid issue as well, in addition to a part of that clinical presentation. So when it comes to assessing liver and kidneys, or first maybe I need to back up. So just to kind of give a little recap of how the thyroid works. So we have a brain signal, TSH. Many of you have heard of this, thyroid stimulating hormone, which signals from our brain down to our thyroid gland, and it's part of a big feedback loop. So it'll tell our thyroid gland to make thyroid hormones, of which we have two main ones, T4 and T3. Now, about 90% of the hormones made by your thyroid gland here in your throat are T4. Now, your body doesn't use T4 directly. It has to convert it into T3. And that conversion happens in our body environment. So I hope that kind of came full circle. That happens in our muscles, in our liver, in our kidneys, and in our brain. And really every tissue for that matter, but that's where the four main tissues of, call it most of that conversion. And now our body then reads how much T4 and T3 is there, and it adjusts to TSH, and it's this big loop. Today we're talking about that body environment, that liver, kidney, muscle, and brain areas, and how they're converting and using T4, or converting T4 into T3, and then ultimately using T3. So first thing we know is the liver and the kidneys need to function. Now, we know the liver is about 80% of that conversion, kidneys 10 to 20% of that conversion. But the other part of that is we can kind of group it into the same system because they're both major detox organs. And how do we know we have a liver problem? Just face value, you walk into the door, I don't feel that good. How are we going to know what's going on with your liver and your kidneys? Well, the first thing is a body comp assessment. We look at bioimpedance analysis. That's what I use in the office, a BIA. And it gives us really good fluid numbers. So if you come in and we see high extracellular fluid in relation to intracellular fluid, first thing you can use your eyes to, you can see puffiness in a lot of cases. Well, if we see you're holding on to a lot of extracellular fluid, and I use the term bloat as a way to describe extracellular fluid above ideal. So you're holding on to extra fluid that is above what a perfect fluid balance looks like. We call that bloat. You don't need it. We want it out of your body. That would be our first indication you're not detoxing very well. And we say the solution to pollution is dilution. So if your body's not eliminating this extracellular waste, this waste from living, then you're holding on to it, you're bloating, and we can see it via the body count numbers. If you refer back to our first Thyroid Lifestyle podcast, bloating is the number one indication there's something going on with the thyroid. Your body doesn't get rid of cellular waste when the thyroid is sluggish. So in that regard, that's our first indicator. We see that on day one. Every person that comes in, we see how much bloat they're having or holding on to. And also, as many of you know, with body comp analytics, we have a thyroid point. So a lot of times we're able to assess and get a good indication of a thyroid case or very early on. If we're running numbers before we could see it within the first 5 minutes. Next, when it comes to labs, there are a few labs outside of the normal thyroid panel that we do. GGT, which is a marker that is an indication of the glutathione system, or I like to say it's our toxic load indicator. So when that marker is high, we know the toxic load, the load going to the liver, how much sludge we have floating around in our body might be too high. And incidentally, the body uses, or the thyroid system and GGT both use very similar nutrients. The same, for example, selenium is important for both. So we can see there's a lot of nutrient crossover with those systems. So if you're not detoxing well, your toxic load is too high, we know your body's not converting T4 to T3, and ultimately you have a thyroid case. Liver enzymes, AST and ALT. Well, anyone that's got a physical in the past 5 years has these numbers. These numbers do change pretty rapidly. So sometimes, we need to rerun these numbers or run them periodically. But if these numbers are running high, it means you have something damaging the liver going on today. So if you have liver stress today, we need to get rid of your liver stress. We need to figure that out. And kidney function, there's 3 or a couple, maybe 4, creatinine, EGFR, which is how many milliliters of blood per minute your kidneys are filtering, and BUN, blood urea nitrogen. So we look at all those and make sure they're ideal. If they're not, then we have to clean up the kidneys. And we'll maybe have a kidney podcast in the future, but eGFR is important, and the acceptable range of that is way too low. And for just to note, if you're testing near the lab range of this, we may need to improve your kidney function. We do not want to get stuck with faulty eGFR because it's a slow-moving marker. It takes time to get that to improve. All right. So bottom line is liver, kidneys, and detox are hugely important and a massive area we need to address when we're addressing the thyroid lifestyle. Next, muscle mass. Now, this is one of the things I'm kind of known for. I have a saying, stress eats muscle, and we'll break into that in a few minutes. But muscle mass is also very easy to assess. We look at it via BIA. As you can see, I do a ton of stuff with body comp. And if your body composition, if your muscle mass percentage, or total muscle mass together, but we really use percentage, if it's below 31% and you're a woman, you're deficient in muscle mass, or your body's proportionally off. Both are an issue. We need the body to have over 31% muscle if you're a woman and 38% muscle if you're a man. So if you're low, we have to address that either by getting, a fat loss plan, a muscle building plan, there's a lot of factors in with muscle. But if you're low in muscle, we know you're going to have a thyroid issue because your body is losing a big area where that T4 to T3 conversion is happening. And back to stress eats muscle, when your body's in a chronic state of stress, it uses sugar for energy. Now, just think about that. If your body's using sugar for energy, what is it not using? It's not using fat. And the purists out there will say, well, you can burn both at the same time. Well, technically, yes. But if you're in a high stress state, if your muscle mass is below 31% or 38% as a male, you are burning sugar, you're burning it hard, you're burning it fast, and you're not using fat as your primary energy source. Fat needs to be the primary energy source, not the backup. And hence you're probably gaining fat or not losing any fat. So stress really locks people into this sugar as your main source of energy, fat as storage. So when you're burning sugar, you're storing fat. We can't overcomplicate it. It's that simple. But if you're in that state, your thyroid hormone's not working very well either. So when it comes to some tests, we need to look at your iron panel. Ferritin's very important for here. Ferritin's about 70% of the iron in your body. And if it's below 50, you definitely have a thyroid-related energy problem. And the iron is going to be a big part of that. So when it comes to thyroid, if your iron or ferritin is low, which I will tell you, I'm here in the Northeast, 19 out of 20 women I see have low ferritin. Very rarely does someone have a ferritin over 50. And with our perfect ideal of 80 to 120 for women, very, very rare. I could count on one hand, with the numbers we've seen in the past year, which is wild. So we're very iron deficient in, at least in the Northeast. I'm not sure about the rest of the country. It may be different in other places. But when the ferritin is below 50, we definitely have an energy issue. Thyroid usually is part of that energy problem. Let's see. Some other ones we could look at, but that one ends up being the most important we want to touch on here. So next, we have our brain. And our brain consumes about 20% of the energy for the day. Now, it does have negligible amounts of T4 to T3 conversion, but ultimately, I would, as many of you know, when your thyroid's low, your brain feels sluggish. And I think a big part of that is because of iodine. Iodine, let me make sure I get this right. So we have iodine ends up being the rate-limiting stent for thyroid hormone production. Iodine has been found in the choroid plexus in the brain. Iodine is used by the brain. So it's one of those interesting things where Iodine is intimately related. It's part of thyroid hormone. Iodine's necessary for high IQ and healthy brain function, and it improves brain function in a lot of people. They feel better when they take it, and it's all this related. So we find people with the best thyroid function, thyroid hormones, best T4 to T3 conversion, the whole gamut of how everything's ratioed and working, they have the best brain function. So it's a very pivotal part of is if your thyroid isn't working, your brain's not working. And we want our brain to work because it controls everything in our body. And the second part of that is neurotransmitter balance. So, I'd say that there's a lot of neurotransmitters. The four main ones, I think, that really affect how people move and think and, what I mean, like move throughout the day is dopamine, acetylcholine, GABA, and serotonin, of which I think GABA is massively important. I think that's probably the most important one of all. Because GABA is your anti-anxiety neurotransmitter. So a lot of people, when stress gets too high, they run out of GABA. Their brain starts going and it doesn't slow down and they don't get this calm, relaxing effect, which then ramps up the body and it turns us into stress, and then our tissue's not converting T4 to T3 very well, and it can snowball really quickly. So a big part of the brain is we want it balanced in terms of neurotransmitter function. And thyroid has a really intimate link with dopamine. And part of that is because they have the same circadian rhythm. Dopamine's highest in the morning and lowest in the evening. And think, when do you want to focus the most? You probably want to focus more in the morning and less in the evening. They also use thyroid hormones, and dopamine have the same backbone or amino acid. They both use tyrosine as the main structure of the neurotransmitter and the hormone. So they're very intimately related. So they kind of feed each other very well. So next, we covered our four main body environment areas. Now we have kind of the body environment habits. So the little things we can do, or the other areas we want to address or make sure we address when improving and optimizing thyroid hormone production, usage, and conversion. Gut health. Well, if there's an autoimmune thing going on, if you're constipated, if you're bloated, if you have food allergies, of course, we have to improve your gut. Nothing in the body is going to work if your gut isn't working smoothly. So gut health is always part of most plans. And generally, as you get healthier, the healthier you eat, the more hydrated you are, gut health usually improves. But gut health is a big player, and we can't ignore it in a thyroid case. And many of you know, once we start improving thyroid, generally people poop better. And as constipation can be a common symptom in low thyroid. Celtic sea salt in the morning. And this is something we do use bloods for. So we can see when your sodium's low, you probably need salt. And I have an article I wrote on, I have this on our blog, which you'll see. But sea salt is very important. It helps regulate hydration. It's good for the adrenals. And oddly enough, you would think with all the salt fear, we'd have this massive salt issue, but we have a salt deficiency issue going around. So Celtic sea salt really it works hand in hand with iodine and other thyroid nutrients. It helps hydrate the body. It's a really solid thing that improves overall hydration of the body. It helps detox bromides and can potentially have a little fluoride detox. So it does a lot of stuff. So Celtic sea salt, anywhere from a pinch to a teaspoon or more in the morning, can be very, very helpful. Food before coffee. Now, in many people, this ends up being greatly important. So we know food stimulates thyroid hormone. The thyroid gland, it responds to calories. So when you eat a lot, small frequent meals, it can boost the thyroid. So in the morning, we want to boost and support thyroid production first before we support cortisol and dopamine, as in coffee. So a lot of people wake up and can't do anything until they have their coffee. Well, they're just stimulating, stress hormones, adrenaline, and dopamine before thyroid. So we want that smooth thyroid energy coming in before we want stress. So food before coffee really begins to cement that into rhythm, into your circadian rhythm. Your body looks for food, so it'll give wake up the thyroid, get the thyroid working, and then use coffee as more fun than necessary. Waking up at the same time every single day. This is a big one. If you really want to cement in a solid circadian rhythm, we have to start getting up at the same time every day. That will train the body to really wake up, get the body moving. It'll wake up all those hormones, neurotransmitters in the morning and keep your body in a rhythm. I'm sure many of you know, usually it's a grandparent of some sort. They wake up at the same time early, and they're always awake no matter what time they go to bed at that same time. Well, that's a nice circadian rhythm. We need to break back into that and get moving in the morning. I'm not talking, a full-blown hour-long workout. I'm talking just get the blood pumping a little bit. Go up and down the stairs a few times. Do a few jumping jacks. Walk around the block. Look at, a lot of people are, go outside, look at the sun, get the sun on your face. Get the body woken up. That'll help the body kick in and get those early morning hormones like thyroid hormone and dopamine. And we want the right amount of cortisol in the morning as well to kind of kick on and keep our body moving. And like I mentioned before, calories. Thyroid hormone needs calories. So ultimately, I'm sure some of you put this together already, fasting, or intermittent fasting, which is just a popular name for skipping meals, doesn't help thyroid function in a lot of people. You can't eat at 4 o'clock in the afternoon as your first meal and expect your thyroid to work very well. Your body's just going to start living on cortisol. And we see that over time. Some people it does work for. Most people, we do better when we food before coffee, and we move that intermittent window into eating when you wake up and maybe cutting food off earlier than you want to. But 3 to 4 meals a day, usually 4 with a snack or even a little more, 3 to 4 hours apart. We want to eat good, clean foods. Of course, if we dive into, macros and things with thyroid, carbohydrates seem to stimulate thyroid production more than protein. But we found clinically food in general works. So you can eat that protein, that high protein in the morning, which will make you feel good. It'll help your dopamine. It'll make your brain feel good, keep you full throughout the day, less cravings. Seems to work really well at boosting the thyroid. So that's where, the science, sometimes science tells you good info, but then we have to use it in real life. And when we use it in real life, we find that we can adjust it a little bit. But it seems like calories in the morning really, really help. And consistent calories throughout the day are necessary for healthy thyroid. And of course, sleep. Sleep and thyroid work together in that the better the thyroid function, the better you sleep. So they both kind of work. I have a lot of different articles on sleep, so we can review that, or if people are interested, we can do a podcast on sleep. But we need to sleep. So part of that is getting to bed, maybe not as strictly at the same time as waking up, but we have a lot of these things we need to start incorporating. And some people really need to try hard and live the thyroid lifestyle. And some people maybe do 1 or 2 things, and it can really boost and help their thyroid. So I hope this was beneficial for everyone watching. I mean, we got a lot of good habits, some good info. I hope it adds to the other thyroid podcasts we have. And keep looking out. Our next podcast is going to be a big one. We're going to be touching on that GABA that we talked about in here, one of those main neurotransmitters, and the main one we see in the office clinically that we need to support and help. All right, until next time, we'll see you later.